Wow, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. Today's conversation is really looking at the plant-based diet. Our guest today, Dr. Gemma Newman, will be talking about her book, why she wrote this book, which is focusing on plant-based diet and how you could eat well to protect yourself against the Western-born disease such as diabetes, heart attack, and high blood pressure. She'll be telling us about her own journey and how she got into medicine. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Gemma and her work. Dr. Gemma has worked in medicine for 18 years and is a senior partner at a family medical practice, where she worked for 14 years. She studied at University of Wales College of Medicine and has worked in many specialities as a doctor. She gained additional qualifications in gynaecology and family planning. She's a specialist in interest in holistic health, plant-based nutrition, and lifestyle medicine. In her practice, she's come to understand that body, mind, and soul are not separated, and that it's only in addressing the root cause of stress and disconnecting that we truly heal from inside out. She's regularly invited to teach other doctors and the general public via her training programs. We'll be talking to her because she's an expert. She's been on numerous conversations on BBC, ITV, and the rest of them. She's written many articles. So I'm so delighted that she's taken the time out of her busy schedule to talk to us. Meet our amazing guest, Dr. Gemma Newman, as she shares her story. Well, hello everyone. Welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation. Myself, Anne Welsh. If you listen to the introduction, today's conversation is truly for you. Are you a woman? Are you thinking about your health? How better to improve your health? If you want to start a journey of plant-based diet because you're thinking that this is the right time to do it. This is the right time to, revisit my eating pattern and eat better. The lady who's written a step-by-step guide. She is Dr. Gemma Newman, and she'll be telling us about her journey, why she decided to write this book. Why is she a doctor, first and foremost? Because, we want to understand, why do people go into that profession? Because it requires lots of love, tender care. What does she understand about our human body and how she can help us overcome our pain? Dr. Gemma, how are you?
I'm very well, Anne. That was a lovely introduction. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Honestly, I read your bio. I was like, yes, this is exactly what we need today, especially with everything going on, with stress, menopause for women, all kinds of hormonal imbalance that we're all going through these days. I don't know. I think that probably the pandemic has brought more anxiety, and that has made us imbalanced in one way or the other. One of the things I'm so excited about in your work is that you have a special interest in holistic health. And that's something I'll be asking you the question about, this holistic health, because we hear so much about it, but not quite sure what is holistic health? How does it really apply to us? Before we get started, Dr. Gemma, who are you?
Who am I? Oh, that's a big question. Who am I? That's a really good question. Who are any of us? I believe that I am a person that strives to do better, to help people feel better, basically. And it's what I enjoy. It's what I love. And you asked in the intro, you were talking about the qualities that make a doctor and why people do it. And people do it for lots of different reasons. They do it because they're interested in science, because they're interested in certain aspects of medical practice. But a lot of people, certainly people that I got to know well over my medical training, did it because they care about people and they want to help people. And I know it sounds corny, but it's the truth. And I see that with a lot of my colleagues over time, that sometimes that initial intention can wear you down after a while if you're so caught up in all of the stress, the sort of demands of the job, the long hours, and even I suppose the specificity of having to be a doctor, because you do have to be very specific in your training, in your guidance, in your advice, and it can sometimes lead to a certain level of cynicism, I think, in the medical profession as well. But at the core, I believe, of most people going into the profession, it's a real desire to help people, and that was certainly my motivation going into it. And you asked about holistic health and what it means. And I think from my point of view, nothing sums that up better than a quote that I heard from the late great Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And he said that sooner or later we're going to have to stop pulling people out of the river, and instead we're going to have to walk upstream and figure out why it is they keep falling in. And to me, that really encapsulates the spirit of why I find holistic healing so beneficial, is because, you know, we all have our own stories, we all have our own experiences, and understanding those experiences and the stories that come from those experiences are a really good start in understanding how best to heal the body.
That's amazing. I can't believe that. When you look at your background, you know, you're a doctor. When you look at your beginnings, what led you on that path? Because the reason I always ask this question is because there's so many young stars out there who are looking at different platforms to get ahead. And for those young ones who are deciding on going through this medical path, what led you to decide that this is what you wanted to do?
When I was about 5, we had a next door neighbour, and she was elderly, and she slipped outside in her garden, and myself and my mum were nearby. We saw what happened, and my mum, she sort of panicked. She didn't really know what to do. And I said, I don't know why I said this, I was 5. I said, okay, we need to call an ambulance and you need to go and get some towels.
No.
She said, okay. So she went in and she got a towel, and she got someone to call an ambulance, and then we went back to the lady and we put the towel under her head and we sort of helped to stop the bleeding, and it gave her a nice little pillow as well. And my mum said, oh, you should do this. Like, you know, you were really good, Gemma, in this little crisis. And I remember that moment because, you know, it didn't seem to be too difficult to sort of, you know, step up and make a suggestion. But I also really like the idea of helping somebody and being that person. And I think perhaps on a more esoteric level, I had an upbringing where I was an only child for quite some time before my sister was born. And I feel as though it wasn't a traditional mother-daughter relationship. I felt like I was very useful in being somebody that my mum could rely on in her life. And I enjoyed that role. And I got a lot of satisfaction from it. And I think, reflecting on my choices in life, I think that one of the things that I got a lot of meaning from was being there for somebody else. And I think that that's probably partly why I chose a caring profession. And also my dad's mum, she actually trained as a doctor many years ago. And although I never saw her in practice, I was always impressed by her independence and the fact that she actually trained to be a doctor at a time at which hardly anybody who was a woman could have done that. She was born in 1920. She went to university during the war, and she immediately after the war went to practice in India, and that's where she met my grandfather. And so hearing about that story, it really inspired me, because if she can do it, then I can certainly do it, is basically what I thought to myself. Even though it would be difficult, it was really inspirational for me.
When you look at being a junior doctor, because a lot of people go into that phase and then a lot of people drop out because they say the work there is too hard, there's a lot of demands on you, your eating pattern is really off, because you're either eating at odd hours, you're eating lots of processed food. What advice would you, looking back, what advice would you give to the junior doctors out there to encourage them to stay on track and also to help them with their eating patterns during that difficult, challenging time?
Such a good question, because I fell into that exact trap. You know, it was really hard at first when you go from being a student and being able to basically manage your own time. I had a job as well. I worked in a pub and a bar and a few other places to make ends meet, but essentially you do have your own time. Whereas when you start working as a junior doctor, as you've rightly said, the hours, maybe it's not the same now, I'm not sure, but when I was doing it, the hours were very intense. But I think there are different pressures these days. So I've been a doctor now for 18 years. So when I started, the hours were long, but there was also a lot of camaraderie on the ward. You felt really looked after. You felt as though your seniors really had your back. You had a team that you were working with, and you were all working together. Whereas my understanding is that nowadays there are different pressures. So although the European Working Time Directive means that there are less hours than it used to be, I think there's probably also less support. People find themselves on rotation where there's a lack of staff. There may be more people potentially taking time sick because of stress. And certainly from what I hear from colleagues, you don't necessarily have that sort of same sense of camaraderie. So it's an emotional stress. I think it's more of an emotional stress because you're dealing with all the things that you've never dealt with before. You're seeing people in extreme situations, and you may not feel quite as supported perhaps as you would have done in the past. And for me, it was true that I just kind of grabbed whatever I could on the ward. If there was a big box of chocolates or biscuits or a Domino's pizza delivery, I'd be there, I'd eat it because I was hungry, there's nothing else to eat. So I think my best advice is don't do what I did, if you can avoid it. Aim to have something in a Tupperware box that you make and bring in if you can. If you have a family, that would be probably harder, but most junior doctors are still at that stage where they've just finished university. They may not have a family yet, but perhaps on a weekend you can make sort of half day sort of cook day and literally just roast a load of veggies, make a curry or a stew or whatever you want to make, store it in different boxes and then take it into work with you. So you're guaranteed to have something that will nourish you as you do a long shift, and you don't need to worry about finding a vending machine or grabbing a slice of pizza.
Yes, and I have to ask this question because it's so important in the medical world, because you've understood it, you've done so many diversity parts of medicine in terms of specialty. Where have you witnessed pain that has got you really asking questions about the existence of human beings? Because you must, and one other thing I'm always fascinated when I speak to a doctor is that you see all kinds of things. You see all kinds of people coming in and out of it. What have you witnessed that has made you really more fascinated about this journey of being a doctor? And how have you been able to utilize those lessons you've learned to improve your access and giving those help to others?
I think my patients have taught me a lot more than I've taught them over the years. And there is, you asked me about where I've witnessed pain. And I think being human in and of itself is a situation that causes an immense amount of pain, emotional and physical. And different people will experience pain points at different times, and they'll come from many different places. So I think the mental pain that I've experienced in my psychiatry work has been extreme for a lot of people, and I think that's the hardest pain, because for people who are experiencing a physical pain, if they have a more if they have a mindset, or at least the emotional resources that can help them cope with that physical pain, then they do a lot better, I find, than the people who have really struggled to find those emotional resources and may not even be in physical pain at all, but may be struggling deeply with emotional pain, which can then impact on many other aspects of their lives in a negative way. I think it's a really good question that I've not been asked before, because I think that pain and suffering are two different things. we all experience pain, but I think the continued suffering that we experience as a result of that pain varies widely, based on the people I've met. And I've been really inspired by some of the patients that I've met who have been able to use psychological techniques, who have seemingly always tried to find the bright side of some of the situations that they find themselves in. And it brings me great hope for humanity, really, that when I see patients that have such strength despite the adversity that they've experienced, such a positive outlook. And you don't have to be positive all the time. It's not even about trying to just smile through and ignore. It's really, I suppose, what I find it is about coming to an awareness of the fact that your body will experience painful situations, and what are you going to do with that? How are you in this human body going to find a way to expand through that experience, to grow, to give, to love, all of the things that also make being a human so beautiful, and can in some ways be really enhanced if you know that you've been able to achieve an experience of those things through pain.
Absolutely. I love it. What a beautiful answer. So I've never heard it this way described. So this is really beautiful. So we're going back to the holistic health, because we hear this all the time. You could Google search that word holistic health, and then people say it means different things. In your experience as a doctor, what does holistic health mean?
So, as I mentioned before, it's about coming to a root understanding of some of the contributors that will make your experience of illness better or worse. And the core foundation, I think, of looking at something holistically has a number of different elements, but I'd say basically it's about eating foods that nourish your body, moving your body in ways that nourish it, refueling through sleep in a way that respects the sleep process as much as possible, emotional processing of the situations in which we find ourselves, whatever that means for the person, and finding ways to connect with your highest self and with your community that give you a strong sense of purpose. I think, to me, those are the core foundations of a holistic approach to healing. Mm-hmm. And obviously in my practice, I follow guidelines, I prescribe medications, I talk about procedures, I refer to specialists, I do all the things that are important for a doctor to do. But I also like to understand what it is about somebody's day-to-day habits and lifestyle that could be improving their situation or causing it to deteriorate. So that's where I come from.
So how's the mind, body and soul connected? Because this is something you talk openly about, that the mind, body and souls are connected. How is that possible?
Well, the mind is really connected to the body very deeply, because the thoughts that pop into our heads come from the synapses in our brain, which is part of the same body that the rest of our organs share. So I think it's pretty obvious when we talk about that mind-body connection, because they are really one and the same. And the foods that we eat affect the thoughts that we have, and the movement that we do affects our brain function, and the sleep that we get affects the lymphatic system and the ability to drain toxins from the brain. So we can see that there are a number of ways that we can tangibly see a connection between the mind and the body. When we talk about mind, body, soul connection, that's something that people find a bit more challenging, because some of us have very diverse backgrounds and belief systems, and so it may be that somebody who is an atheist doesn't believe in the existence of a soul, or somebody who is a devout Christian or a devout Muslim doesn't believe in a more esoteric way of thinking around that sort of spirit connection. So for me, in my practice, I really aim to focus on an understanding that the mind and body are deeply and physically connected, and that in harmonizing mind and body and finding purpose within ourselves and connecting with our highest self, those of us who do have a more sort of faith-based or spiritual background will call that something else. And those of us who are atheists will call it a mind-body connection, which has basically led you to finding the best, that best part of yourself ultimately.
The COVID brought a lot of stress on many of us. And it was just one of those instances that we didn't realize how much stress had an impact on us as well. It also made people who were more worried who got the COVID more worse, because, just a lot of things that stressed us was, but we've never sat down and thought about it. In your opinion, as a doctor, how can we protect ourselves from the root causes of stress?
That's a good question. And there are so many ways, but I think probably it would start with just taking a step back and looking at our day-to-day patterns, the things that we need to notice, what the thoughts that we have and the things that we do. And that's actually a really hard first step for a lot of people. But it's an important one. So when you wake up in the morning, do you immediately go and feed a baby? Do you go and deal with somebody that you're caring for? Do you have a shower? Do you clean your teeth? Do you meditate? Do you go on social media? Do you eat breakfast? Do you not eat breakfast? What is your day-to-day routine? And in that routine, what are the thought processes that you go through? Is everything unconscious, or are there conscious decisions that you make throughout the day that lead you to a different way of being? So I think probably the first step would be to do a little inventory to find out what your patterns are, and notice how those patterns make you feel. Yeah. And many of us will be feeling overwhelmed during the time of the pandemic and beyond, especially with financial stresses. I've had many patients with extreme financial stress, as well as the stress of isolation and loneliness. But it's an understanding of how those routines impact our mental health. And then only when we understand how it impacts us can we begin to imagine how things could be different. So I think going through that process is really important. Noticing, do I actually move my body during the week? What kind of stuff do I watch on the TV? When I'm on social media, what accounts am I following? When I'm with my children, how much time do I spend on the phone? When I'm in my caring role, how does that make me feel? When I'm at work, how does that make me feel? How do I treat my colleagues? How do my colleagues treat me? These are all basic questions that we don't necessarily routinely ask ourselves, but I think are really crucial in understanding how to improve our quality of life and then take action from those observations.
Your book, I have to talk about that, because you've recently written this book, The Plant Power Doctor. I mean, this is just I love the title, The Plant Power Doctor. A simple prescription for a healthier you. There you are, everyone. This is the book. You should definitely go out, The Plant Power Doctor. Wow. What led you to write this book, and what are some of the messages we could get from reading this book? The Plant Power Doctor, I repeat again. We should start calling you the Plant Power Doctor now.
Oh, well, I wrote the book because I realized there was a lot of information in the medical and nutrition literature that wasn't translating into the day-to-day life of my patients. And I also, quite some years ago, realized that we were in not only a health crisis, but an environmental crisis. And plant-based nutrition is a very handy way of helping to enhance personal health and planetary health at the same time. And these are important issues that doctors generally don't tend to talk about. And obviously, when I'm in a consultation with my patient, I'm not going to start talking about the 6th mass extinction event and how we're degrading the environment. But what I do talk about is how can we reduce our risk of heart disease? How can we reduce our risk of cancer? How can we reduce our risk of diabetes, type 2 diabetes? These are the biggest causes of morbidity and mortality in the Western world. And plant-based nutrition, healthy plant-based nutrition, has a very important role in minimizing the risks of these top 3 killers, basically. And so I thought, well, let's get stuck in. Let's dive into the literature. There are nearly 600 references on my website that are in the book, and they're listed sentence by sentence. So if people are really curious about where the science is, they can look at the references on my website. There are some key references in the book, but the book is really made to be a colorful, vibrant, enticing way of understanding how healthy plant-based nutrition can help our bodies, and then how to do it. So it's all encapsulated in that book.
That's amazing. And anyone who wants a copy of your book can get the copy on Amazon, I'm presuming. You
can get it anywhere that you want to buy books. You may have to ask Smiths or Waterstones to order it in. I know that some of the Waterstones I've been in have had it in there. But yeah, any bookshop, Blackwell's, Smiths, Foyles, your local independent bookshop. And yes, of course, Amazon do stock it as well. And if you're not based in the UK, you can get it on the Book Depository website. You can get it in Australia, and you can also get it now in the US in places like Barnes & Noble and Target.
And it's really encouraging and telling you about to avoid certain illnesses, like the key the illnesses you mentioned. These are some of the diets you should be having. These are some of the food you should be including in your diet, I presume, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yes. And it's not just me saying that. I think this is the sad thing, is that people don't realize that there's actually a lot of data to suggest this is true. So, the American College of Cardiology talks about plant-based diets as being the number one thing you can do to help prevent heart disease. World Cancer Research Fund says that a diet centered around fruits, vegetables, whole grains and legumes is the cornerstone of a cancer preventing diet. And you've got the American College of Clinical Endocrinologists talking about how a healthy plant-based diet is one of the best ways you can prevent type 2 diabetes. So these are big organizations. These are world leading guidelines. And then you've got the Eat Lancet report, which is a huge analysis of planetary diet health and how we can move towards sustainable diet patterns for humans globally. And they're all pointing towards the same direction, a very similar direction, in that we're trying to maximize our plant foods to maximize our health and also maximize efficient land use as well. So yeah, it's exciting. It's a win-win, but I want to make it empowering. I think one of the things when people learn about environmental health, they can feel really hopeless, as though there's nothing much we can do. But actually, if everybody in our country decided to just have one more plant-based meal a week, then we see tremendous differences in terms of land use and quality of life over the course of a lifespan. So yeah, I get really excited about this, really passionate. And the book, I wanted to make it exciting too. I wanted people to be able to flick through, find a color-coded chapter that they like with gorgeous illustrations, learn some of the science, and then flip round to the back for beautiful full color images of gorgeous recipes to get them stuck in.
That's amazing. I love the recipe bits. That was something I just ordered a copy of it, and I love the recipe bit. So I would definitely advise everyone who's looking to better improve our lives, because we now know that when you're better, you're able to fight diseases even easier than waiting. When we could do it now. So I definitely would encourage that. In your section of your website, there's a myth busting on your website that says, what are some of the biggest, you're going through it and you're analyzing some of the myths that people have been saying, I think probably on Google, and you say, what are some of the biggest myths about healthy eating that needs to be busted? Why did you have this section on your website?
Well, I thought that it would be useful for people, because quite often there's a lot of confusion around some of the benefits of eating more plants, and I thought, there were a lot of people that have certainly online asked me similar questions. So I thought, well, let's just get it on a website and people can ask questions answered.
It's really, really good, because you really go in there, you just things that people are always confused about, and you go into it. On a serious note, you are qualified as a Jinkenden Reiki practitioner for the purpose of pain relief. And I thought, wow, what is this? Why did you decide to go on that path? Can you please explain what is this practice and the health benefits for people who might be going through pain?
So I read some of the research around various energetic healing modalities, and they interested me. And there were a few studies to show that Reiki practice has quite an interesting effect at improving pain relief. There was a study on intravertebral disc pain and disc prolapse, back pain essentially. And there's also some evidence to suggest it could be helpful for people with cancer-related pain. Some fairly well-respected cancer centres, both in the US and the UK, have been offering Reiki as a way of improving pain management during cancer treatments. And I wanted to know more. And so I decided to study both Western style and Jikiden Reiki, which is the directly passed down Reiki from Japan. And I found it to be a tremendously helpful and useful adjunct to my therapy for patients for whom are interested. It's not something that everybody would resonate with or potentially enjoy, but it's essentially a hands-on therapy, and it's quite hard to describe unless you've had a session, but it's essentially a hands-on therapeutic session that is designed to improve pain management, basically.
As a doctor, one of your passion is also farming. If I get to my final question, why did you take on that path of going into the farming sector?
Well, I haven't actually. I grew up actually on a pig farm years ago. My father used to look after the pigs, and so it interested me from that point of view. But I haven't gone into farming recently. I am still a doctor. I'm not a farmer. But having read some of the research around regenerative agriculture, I realized it was important, again, to really connect with the land and produce food in a way that will nourish and sustain us, but also nourish and sustain the soil. If we're going to be able to sustain nutrient-rich soil in which to grow food for the next generation. And again, for me, it's always been about taking a step back and looking at the big picture, understanding that there's more to health and wellness than just taking a pill or having a procedure. It's about looking at the causes of illness on a personal level and within our gut microbiome, within our environment, our emotional health and well-being, but also as a planet, and understanding that the way that we currently produce food is not something that we can sustain for the next generation, which is something I think we need to address as well. So yeah, that's what fueled my passion.
Dr. Gemma, before I let you go, what are some of the steps a person can do to future-proof themselves for a better health, especially with now the hormonal imbalances, the stress, and all of this thing going through our minds lately? What can we do to improve our health?
Well, you could check out the book. Because I wrote there's chapters on diabetes, heart disease, hormone health, skin health. There's chapters on plant-based eating for all ages. There's a really powerful chapter on cancer. So there's a number of different things in there that might be useful. Eating more plants is generally a huge winner. And I'd say just prioritizing a little bit more the things that light you up. What really helps you to feel good? How do you connect with people? What kind of things do you do in your day that bring you joy? And aiming to do more of those in a healthy way. Moving your body, that's something that I struggle with from time to time, especially because I've got a job where I sit down all day. And for me, I was never somebody that felt that big endorphin rush when I exercised. So that's advice for myself as well, is to get your body moving. It's not about getting a bikini body or looking amazing. It's about having strong bones, moving through your lifespan, reducing your risk of cancer, all of these things that moving your body can do for you, which are just incredible. And if you're somebody that struggles with sleep or at least doesn't prioritize sleep, then maybe getting an early night as part of your routine will be helpful as well. Those are just a few very short and small nuggets of information, but hopefully will help some of your listeners depending on what they're struggling with.
Dr. Gemma Newman, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I mean, I've read some of your book chapters and it's really, really encouraging because, you know, we need this right now. And I'm so glad you took the time out of your busy schedule to put these down, because we tend to forget the number one killers in the Western world are just things like diabetes, high blood pressure, and all of this. And it's all to do with our eating, not eating the right food. And you've just taken the time out of your very busy schedule to do it. So thank you so much. And I really hope to catch up with you again to learn more about, you know, the different, because I could go on with you. This whole, what you do is so vast. There's so much more we could talk about, and I would love to catch up again with you soon.
Thank you, Anne. It's been a real pleasure to be on your show. And I really appreciate all that you're doing to help people feel empowered and to understand that they can have a meaningful and fantastic life with or without pain. So I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doctor.